grower. Today, should I say, meet the breeder. We've got a bit of a different episode with a bit of a different guest. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome Rambo's cousin to the show. Rambo, welcome, brother.
Thanks, dude. I'm really happy to be here. I was thinking about it, and we've actually been chatting with each other for a while, like almost a year if we go back and look when we started talking on Reddit.
Yep.
And I think you were just starting your channel out then. And look at where you're at now. You just surpassed 250K views. Like I don't know how many subscribers, but you're going up, and it's awesome to see that. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Oh man, and I'm honored to have you. You know, it's interesting because I featured some of your grow stuff way back when my format was a little bit different. It was a bit more of a community focused type show, well, at least part of it. And I'll throw a picture up of the double grape that drew me to you and the amazing job that you did with it here, just so people kind of see what you're all about there. But you also do a lot of breeding and stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show today. Is just I haven't really had anybody on that talks about breeding, has the experience that you do, so definitely want to get into it. And just so the viewers know, Rambo here isn't comfortable being on camera, so he just didn't want to have his face up. As we all know, the hobby that we do partake in can, well, it makes some people uncomfortable, so not everybody likes to be on camera, and we totally respect that. And dude, again, thanks for being here.
Trust me, I'm doing you guys a favor by not putting my ugly mug up there for you.
Yeah, I get a face for radio, so yeah, we don't we don't discount anything.
I got a face for a grow room, so
right on. Well, hey, before we go any further, I just want to take a moment to thank the show sponsor, Mars Hydro. Throwing down the love for the show, guys. There's discount codes below. Links to all their stuff. Go check them out. I love their grow lights personally. Been growing with them for a long time. And if you want to support me yourself, head on over to the Patreon. Again, links down below. We've got contests going, contests specific for Patreons, and then contests for those in general over on my website, Photosyntech.ca. That being said, Rambo, let's talk about growing. Let's talk about breeding, sir.
Let's do it.
I'd like you to break it down for me. Let's discuss how you kind of got to where you are now. What's your life story? What's your background? Break it down for me.
Background, geez. So I started growing at a young age, early in high school. Actually, I was living with the guy that taught me to grow, who was my grow mentor, and I think everyone should have a grow mentor. Somebody to kind of show you the ropes, the ins and outs, tell you when you're messing up, and then really help you get on track. So that's who it was for me. And I was living with him at the time, and I was kind of in a bad place when I started living with him, getting into a lot of trouble. I had a bad attitude and just was really on the wrong path. And I knew he was growing, and I wanted to grow with him. And he's like, basically, get your shit together and I'll teach you how to grow. And it was a little bit of motivation and incentive for me to kind of stop hanging out with the wrong people and kind of putting focus into, something a little more productive. Super into weed at the time. And of course, all my friends were and everything. And we didn't know anybody that grew. So to be able to grow your own weed and know how to do that was just like, a major advantage at that time. A lot of the stuff that was going around was just like, real swaggy Mexican brick weed and stuff like that. And having some homegrown really upped your status. So anyways, that's when I started growing. And I guess that's when I first had my first experience with breeding too. Some of the first grows that I did with him was some like pollinations, kind of guerrilla style out in the woods. This was like early 2000s. So there was, up until that time, we had been growing like bag seed or stuff that, you could go to a concert, like a fish concert was pretty big back then, and come home with some pretty fire weed that you couldn't find around your area. And sometimes you'd be lucky and find a seed or whatever, or sometimes you'd be lucky and find some guy selling some seeds, but you never really knew what you had. And then early 2000s, a guy named Mark Emery
Yeah.
had a website. He was over there in Canada, or up there, I should say. And this was like, nobody had ever seen anything like this before. Like, you didn't have access to like seeds like this. At least we didn't. And to be able to buy them online and then have them shipped to you, it was like, it was like pretty damn cool. So we ended up buying a few strains. One was called Shishkaberry, which I think is still around in some capacity still now,
Yeah.
which was an awesome strain. There was also an Ice Princess that we bought, which was a White Widow times Cinderella 99. And so we were growing those out and then pollinating them. And then the next year, taking those seeds and then doing selections, just pulling the small ones, going with the ones that we liked. We were kind of pheno hunting. I didn't know it at the time. That was just kind of like, the way that you did it. And
Picking the
so
best
that's
of the
when,
best. Yeah.
exactly. And then, after a couple of years, we're getting feedback from people, hey, that was really good smoke, or, whatever. Your stuff starts getting better and better. So that's kind of like where I started out from. And yeah, that guy was really, really important to me. Unfortunately, he died of cancer, I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago. And that got me into like indoor growing.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
when at that point I had a house of my own. So like I had some space and I started doing indoor growing and growing weed out for him. And we were testing out new strains and telling me which one helped with pain or which one made him hungry or sleepy or, whatever the case was. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of inspiration when you have someone close to you going through that. But it's also nice to, have a lot of options to kind of treat that cannabis wise.
Yeah, being able to take this wonderful plant that we can grow and use it in that sort of circumstance, it's ultimately, I think, what it's meant for and where it can do the most help. Now, let's talk about your grow style specifically. Do you do organics, bottled nutrients, a mixture of both? Tell me about that.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So I think over the years I've tried almost every type of medium, like nutrient line, organic, soil mixes, just everything. I treat this as like a hobby and a passion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something to geek out over, especially once you get into breeding. But as a lot of you guys know, geeking out over different types of soil, or lights. There's so many aspects of growing that are fun and like exciting to learn about. And so like that's really something that I get into and mess around with a lot of stuff. When I was doing that double grapes and my autoflowers, I was doing Nectar for the Gods soil number 4,
Okay.
and then doing the Nectar for the Gods bottle nutrient line, which holy shit, that had like I was mixing like probably like 7 to 10 bottles of newts every watering, and that just gets a little overwhelming at times. But at the same time I was doing that, I had my greenhouse grow going where I had made my own soil with a build a soil mix. It was like Coots mix that just had a lot of good nutrients in it. And then I would top dress it once it hit in flower with some earthworm castings, and it was good to go. Right now, for seed production, I want something that's giving my plants what they need without really a ton of input from me. Something that's easy. I don't have to really spend a lot of time on or invest a lot of money into keeping it going, because really I'm just making seeds, but at the same time, like I'm wanting to test the plants to see, you know, how they react to just like general nutrients that most people are going to use, as opposed to like some specific soil mix that I have and is like specific to me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of like I said, all over the board. But it challenges me to get good results from each one of those, and each one of those grow styles requires lots of different tweaks to get it to work. So
So then talking about Bad results and tweaking that didn't work. Tell me about a time when growing didn't go so well, when you had a really good lesson learned, but maybe not the best end product.
Well, not to throw any nutrient brand under the bus, but well, and this was as a result of trying all those new things. Like sometimes you throw too much stuff in the pot,
Yeah.
and the soup comes out bad. And that I think was a case of this. It was a mixture of a large space, large containers that I was using, a new nutrient line, and I think new lights also. Um, and the plants just blew up on me, like got way too out of control in veg. I wasn't expecting it because they were auto flowers.
Okay.
And by the time that they were flipping, these things were gigantic. Like I couldn't even step in the room without like bumping up against like 3 or 4 different colas.
Right.
So, but it was too much. And I was on the new feed. I wasn't sure like how much to give them. And they ended up getting underfed. There was multiple strains in there, and some of them were hungry, and it was a mess. And the smoke that I got out at the end was, kind of a result of that. It's pretty much what you would expect. It was larvae. Some of it was burned. I harvested at different times, and it was just kind of like a total fail. And this wasn't that long ago, so it's not like you can still mess stuff up,
Oh yeah.
however much experience that you have. And sometimes you just have to accept the failure. I made some extracts out of it, still pressed into some really great rosin. So you kind of make what you can out of it, and then learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, and that's the thing that most growers, especially the new ones, need to realize is even if you bunk it, even if you have a horrible grow, odds are you're still going to end up with something. And even if it's just a little bit of hash, you still got a little bit of hash. So not a bad thing.
Right. And if you don't try these methods, like if you're listening to one guy that grows a certain way and you're like, okay, I've got to grow that way, and it doesn't work out for you, like there's going to be a grow style that works out for you. You just have to try different things. And I'm not saying like there's not a style that works out for me and that's why I'm always trying different stuff. I just like trying new stuff and always trying to up my game. And for me, like I'm a hands-on guy. Like I like hearing other people's feedback and stuff on products, but nowadays you got people pushing products that or they're being paid to do it, or they're pushing it because there's some sort of a fanboy, and you're not getting honest feedback in a lot of cases. So you got to do it on your own. And yeah, I found a lot of good products that way. So,
Yeah,
and
and
a lot of bad ones too.
oh, for sure. That's the thing is there's so much out there, and some of it isn't even necessary. I mean, you touched on it with having 7 different bottles to mix, or just all these different products that are available. I had a guest on not too long ago. Welcome to the Grow Tent. He's got a fantastic channel, and he's about the most laid back grower that I've ever talked to, in the sense that he barely feeds. He doesn't do a lot of invasive work with his plants. Doesn't do a lot of defoliation, and he ends up with monster harvests, right? So it's just that's sometimes it is what you put into it, but at the same time sometimes it's also knowing when to step back. Getting into talking more about breeding now, you talked a little bit about how you got started, but let's talk about your process. How do you go through determine what plants you'd like to breed with, and well, just give me sort of an end to end.
Yeah. So I can take you through kind of what I'm working on right now,
Yeah.
which is Temptation, which is a strain from Lip Farms. It's ice cream cake times jealousy. Both were originally Sea Junkie strains. And I bought the F1s, a couple packs, and then grew them all out with the intention of taking it to F2. So what I did in that is I popped everything. And so a few caveats going into this, like, first of all, you have to understand, like, when you take on a breeding project, and this may depend on like how your space is, but for me, like, you have to make some sacrifices. Like, for me, I had to grow some flower out beforehand to make sure I had some seedless flower to sit on so that, I could smoke on that, because my next harvest was all going to be, seeded. And you can still smoke it and stuff, but, it's a lot more work. It's just, you want to make sure you have some stuff going into it. So yeah, you sacrifice like seedless flower. So you got to make sure that you're stocked up beforehand. And then I popped all those seeds, made sure all my space was available, bought a whole bunch of 1 gallon containers specific for this, labeled them all 1 through I think it was like 24, 25, and then just grow them out. Make sure you veg them good. Keep an eye on them. Like sometimes you'll have some runts, and then you'll cull some. It's going to be pretty obvious when you have that many plants, which ones are underperforming, because they'll stand out. They stick out in numbers like that, and you just pull them. And then you keep it going, and your numbers will thin. Then you go to flower. I usually flip to flower, like 3 weeks after I can see some good structure going. And that's another way that you can, pick good ones depending on what you're looking for. If you want short and bushy, you're going to want to pick short and bushy plants if that expresses. If you want something a little taller, you can pick that. I pay attention to, internodal spacing to make sure that it's not crazy long and leggy, and you're not going to get big spaces between buds. And you keep selecting all the way until you flip them to flower. And once you flip them to flower, you're going to start seeing them sex, and that's where the male and females are going to come out, and you're going to tell real quick which ones are the males. They're going to have balls, and which ones are the females. They're going to have hairs. I think pretty much everyone knows that, but
Yeah.
it takes, depending on some strains, a longer period of time for them to start sex and showing sex. So you separate the males from the females at that point. And for me, I start looking at the males. And for those, that, again, the important part is what you want to carry over. Like, what is it that you're looking for from that strain? Is it a specific, terp profile? Is it color expression that you're looking for? Maybe you want some large, tall colas or something like that, or maybe you want ones that have that little ladder structure, like golf ball size buds. This is all stuff to take into consideration and to look for. And some of those things you can see in males. It's hard selecting a good male, and there's good info out there on it, but it's kind of hard to find. For me, I do the stem rub and stuff. You can get some smells. Males will actually show trichome sometimes too. I try to look mainly at the pollen sacs, and imagine them as if they were like buds, and that's looking for bud structure and stuff like that. And if you've got big, tall colas full of sacs, then you can hope that that's going to bring over some large tall colas to the cross. So once you pick out your male, you keep him alone, and you can do a couple things at this point. You can either wait up until they start dumping pollen and collect it, and then kill the male at that point. Or you can throw the male in with the female, and then just keep him in there, and then just kind of shake him around. Either or, I just collected the pollen and then kept it for pollinating the females, and just killed the male. At that point, you'll go in usually about 2 to 3 weeks, or once you start seeing pom-poms, like the little white buds start forming with the hairs, and then you go in. For me, I just take a paintbrush and then just paint it right on there onto the bud sites, and try to cover as much as I can. Yeah, and then from there, you wait a couple weeks, and you'll start to see the pistils start to retract and plump up, and you can see some seeds forming. You'll know how well it took, and if you need to pollinate again. Some strains don't accept it. Some pollen doesn't take very well, and some strains don't take pollen very well. So just look for that, and just keep in mind you might have to apply again. But from that point, it's just, carrying it out like you would any other, flowering cycle. Just run it out, keep it fed. They're going to be heavier buds, so you might need some support. And then you grow it out, and that's going to produce your F2 seeds, and that's the next generation. So that's where I am right now. So I took those seeds out. There is a curing process for the seeds too, so that you have a good germination rate. I just ran mine through like an herbs now dryer. I don't know if you've heard of this before. They're supposed to
Yep.
be for buds. Yeah. I didn't use mine for buds, and I had one hanging around. So I let the plants hang dry for a little bit, and then I shucked the seeds out and then put them in the herbs now dryer, and it worked perfectly. I've got 100% germ rate.
Oh,
So the
very
F2,
cool.
yeah, a little pro tip.
Yeah.
The F2 generation, which is all the seeds that I collected from that, I pollinated 3 different females out of all those is what I drilled it down to. So
Wow.
I had one male and then 3 final females, number 5, number 8, number 13. And they all were a little bit different from each other too. Like number 5 was just like straight purple. And then smelled like sweet candy. And then number 13 was like really compact and had some purple in her, but smelled like garlic.
Hmm.
So that was nice that I had 3 different phenos. And then the seeds of each I just kept separate
Yep.
from each other. And I'm running out 10 of each of those right now. I think I'm a couple weeks in, and I have 30 plants right now that I'm running. 10 of each one of those phenos, and I'm going to go through the exact same process. Keep in mind, this time I have a little bit better of an idea of what I'm looking for in terms of what that cross offered, and I'm going to start selectively pulling plants for that. The other thing that I've got going is the original clones. Oh, and one thing I failed to mention is take clones of everything
Yeah.
prior to flipping. That's another thing, is you're going to have a pretty good cloning setup, something that is reliable, and that you can cycle stuff through. So I have mother plants of all 3 of those phenos. I'm running clones of them right now of just strictly flower run, and that's going to give me a much better idea also of what the original plants would have been like if they were not seeded. And just give me more stuff to look for. And then, yeah, you just do it all over again. And then that will make the F3. And that's really where it's going to be starting to be more stable and consistent. The mothers will be available if I ever wanted to do a back cross to try to lock in some of those original traits even further. Some of the other stuff that I'm messing around right now is, so that's F1, F2, and F3. Those
Yep.
are all different generations. F1 is the original cross of 2 strains, and that's where you're going to see the most vigor, like that hybrid vigor. You're also going to see a handful of phenos. But when you do F2s, that's really where you kind of open it up a lot, and you're going to see a lot of variation. And that's where you're going to want to run a higher number of plants and be a little bit more selective with what you're pulling out and what you're looking for. That's why, like for the F2s, I also involve testers. So not only am I running 30 of those on my own, but I've got 30 that are running through different testers right now, 30 total of those different ones. So then, that's where we're sharing info on Discord through Brothers and Farms. And I'll get a better idea of also, more expressions. So yeah, it's really fun, and you can get into it a lot. You can get lost and kind of go down a rabbit hole as well. So after F3, I'm not really looking to take it any further. What I'll do at that point is kind of cross it with some other strains. With some of the clones, I'm going to do S1s, which is kind of another type of breeding where you're making feminized seeds. I'm sure a lot of people that are new to growing, having feminized seeds is appealing. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
It's definitely, you don't have to worry about pulling males out. But it is a little bit harder of a process because you do have to reverse a female plant to begin with, and then use the pollen from that to either, cross onto the same strain, or, make a cross with it.
Of
Um,
course, yeah.
so that,
Removing the male genetics from the line, and then nothing but feminized seeds going forward.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of breeders that are doing that right now.
Hmm.
I know Seed Junkie, like a lot of his recent seed drops that he's done has been all feminized. Not sure if it's they don't want the males to get out there, or if it's, just giving the people what they want. If feminized seeds sell better, I imagine they do,
Yeah,
but
probably. I think it has to do with people not knowing how to, or just wanting to bother with sexing their plants, or going through, 2 months of grow to get a veg plant, flip and realize, ooh, I've got a male here, and, an empty spot in your grow space. Something I'm currently dealing with because the freak show that I was growing ended up being a boy, but that's okay. We cloned it. We're going to do some breeding
oh, that thing
experiments.
was awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get going with that. So let's talk about that reversal a little bit more, though, specifically when it happens naturally. Uh, Earlier this year, I ended up with the Skittles that hermied horribly on me and just coated the entire grow room
Yeah.
in hermy pollen. Now, a lot of people will say, no, don't even bother with those seeds. Some people will say, well, if it crossed on itself, take the S1. Those are probably okay to grow. But, I've been apprehensive myself about doing anything too much with the seeds. What are your thoughts on Hermes?
Yeah, it's difficult to, because there have been some great strains that have originated from
Yeah.
Hermes or bag seed. So I mean, definitely, but they've also, been notoriously hard to work with in Hermes. So like you do carry that trade on. I'm not saying that you can't grow out some fireweed, and like some people don't care about that. Like they'll pluck a couple nanners, and as long as the weeds fire, it's just, part of, like kind of like trimming or something like that. But for me, like I wouldn't, touch it with a 10-foot pole. Like if I find anything that is Hermy, well, and it also depends on like why did it Hermy?
Yeah.
Like was it a lighting thing and you fucked up, or was it a light
Not
stress
this
and the
time.
plant freaked out? That's
Yeah.
right.
No, this one, it was everything went really well. And it was just all of a sudden noticed some premature red hairs and then some more. And then I started seeing the calyxes swell and seeds were appearing. And then I found flowers on the bottom of this plant. So yeah, this was a natural Hermy, unfortunately. No stress.
Yeah, and I've had it happen to me too,
Yeah.
and that's part of, I think, like of not doing due diligence when breeding, is letting some of that stuff slide. Like, sometimes like you have to kind of swallow an entire, like if I work this F2 and all of a sudden I start to find a lot of Hermes, like, I'll kill it. Like I don't want to like put that out into people's gardens. Like a lot of people are growing multiple strains at the same time. And if one strain Hermes, and like you said, the whole tent, like by the time you find it, it could have already like, busted and spread pollen all over. So yeah, I don't mess with those. And if I come across them, yeah, like I'll call them, pay really close attention to the other ones in that strain. And if I notice any more, like I'll just stop working with it.
Yeah.
There's too much stuff to play with to, unless, like if it was a pet project of mine, like let's say, oh, here, okay, so like here's an example where I might mess with a Hermy. So that Shiska berry that I told you that we bought so many years ago, like almost 20 years ago now,
Yep.
when he died, he had given me some stuff, and along with that were some seeds from one of those runs that we did with Shishka berry all those years ago. And the seeds were like super old, weren't kept, refrigerated. They were probably just in a drawer for years and years. But I have like, like probably like 100, 200 of them. There's a lot of them. And I've tried over the years to get them germed, but I just can't. But I'm going to try some new stuff. And let's say that I got got those popped, right? And then I got it all the way to flowering and it was going great. And then I noticed it started to herm. That would be an exception that I would make, because that's like a pet project where I'll work that out down the line. Like I'm willing to, like, take on that herm with the understanding that I'll have to breed it out later, but if I'm just working and making a cross and, like, no, one of them is herming, like, fuck that.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
work with something else. There's too much stuff out there.
So then breeding it out, that would involve a series of back crossing onto itself on the stable part of the genetic that had no traits of the Hermie, I assume.
Exactly. You could do it a bunch of different ways, but it would take a lot of work, is the point. So, like, that's where guys with, like, land that are really dedicated, and there's guys that are dedicated to doing that, like, doing it with land races, or helping bring back really old strains. Like, there's people chasing some old skunks, trying to bring back, like, roadkill skunk, or, like,
Yeah.
just old strains where you can't go click buy on a website somewhere for it. Like, you got to chase down a clone of it from some guy, or, like, some seeds, or, like, 20-year-old seeds or whatever. So you'll take what you can get.
Yeah. Now, speaking of clicking buy on a website, how often do you think people are actually getting the genetics that they're thinking they're getting? I mean, I can go on to multiple sites and buy Gorilla Glue, but is that really Gorilla Glue? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's something that's getting more and more diluted.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple different things. So, like, I think back in the day, um, early with buying online, that there would be some really shady seed banks that would relabel stuff, or rename people's gear to something else. And
Mm.
I'm sure a lot of that still goes on. But I think what is more of a problem is, like, there's especially happening in auto flowers, where it's really suspect, is where they'll say, oh, we've got the newest hype strain in autoflower format. And you're like, well, wait a second, that strain's only been out for, like, 6 months or a year. How the hell is it in autoflower already? And if you know anything about what it takes to convert a photo period to an autoflower, you have to take it to at least F3, preferably F4, until it's all auto. You have to breed out the photo trait. And so, like, when it's just real dubious, so, like, the only option is, like, they're just taking other autoflower strains and renaming them, or either that, or what's happening a lot now that I've been seeing in some forums is people are like, hey man, it's like day 60 or 70 in veg, and my autoflower still hasn't flowered. And it's like, well, dude, sorry, but
Yeah.
that's because it's not an autoflower,
Yep. Yep.
and either they didn't breed it out far enough, or it's some relabeled bullshit, or whatever the case is. Like, yeah, there's definitely some of that that's still going on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I guess it's a thing of buyer beware, and because there's a lot of fly by night places, and oh god, Instagram is the worst. I've had
Yeah.
guys stealing my content for seed sales, and it's ridiculous. So just be careful, folks. Go to a good producer if you can. Try and stay as legal as possible too. Just in that regard, especially up here in Canada.
My advice is go to direct to the breeder as
Yeah.
often as you can. I mean, seed banks serve their purpose, and I am not talking shit on seed banks at all. But what a lot of breeders are starting to do now is, like, sell their gear directly. And what I like about that is, like, you're not only are you getting it direct from the source, but also a lot of times, you can follow them on Instagram and see their entire process, which, when you're buying, on a seed bank website, a lot of times you're going off of a pretty picture, and they don't even have a freaking description 9 times out of 10, like a strain description.
Yeah.
And you'll find that the guys that are doing it direct are putting, a lot more care into that. You'll get a better experience. And I think, like, the most important thing is you're knowing where your stuff is coming from,
Yeah,
which
and that's
which
it.
is super important.
And I think that's a large part in why a lot of us choose to grow your own is because the inputs that are going in,
Yep.
what's not been sprayed on that plant, where things have come from. What do you think your biggest challenge has been in breeding cannabis?
Honestly, putting the amount of time required into it, I've got a full-time job, a family. We were talking earlier, a small child. Um, you can actually probably hear him yelling in the background right now.
Voicing his
Uh,
opinion.
yeah, letting them be known. But yeah, so it takes a lot of time and effort to put it in there. But you know, if it's something that you're passionate about, you're going to find that time to do it. And I slip it in there. Like sometimes like I water in the morning and defoliate at lunch and then like check some other stuff, you know, after work and just like squeeze it in there. And I make it work. That's why going back to the conversation on, you know, like nutrients and setup, like right now, you know, yeah, I'd love to be growing all organic again, but it took so much time to mix all those bottles. I just didn't have it. So for me, like I tried to make my setup as efficient as possible. I use auto pots.
Yep.
You know, I use a huge 65-gallon reservoir. Like I'm mixing nutrients maybe once a week, filling up water once a week, you know, doing some general maintenance in between. But the amount of time that that has saved me in the garden is worth every penny, and allows me to focus on other stuff. So finding little hacks, you know, in your setup that either save time or little hacks in life that give you time that you can put back into the garden. That's kind of like my biggest challenge right now.
Yeah, I agree with like all of that because it's anytime you can shave some time down, automate your watering, get some sort of controller in there, it just makes it easier, makes it flow smoother.
Definitely.
Yeah. What do you think not enough people know about or could be doing more of when they're breeding?
Um, I would say taking the lines out further
Yeah.
is something that I would like to see more people doing. Um, but you know, you can't be mad at just doing huge, you know, cross drops too, where you know you're crossing, you know, one thing against like, you know, 5 to 10 different things. A lot of these seed drops you're seeing. There's a purpose for all of it, right? Something is a little bit more curated versus something that isn't and is allowing, you know, the customer to go out there and do the hunting and the finding and stuff like that. And you know that's a lot of fun of growing too, right? Is trying out different strains and you know popping a pack and seeing what phenos you get and what kind of keepers and this that. So like I would though, however, like to see some of the lines worked a little bit more, um, take a little bit more time taken with it, and then have a little bit more consistency to put out there. That's again going back to autoflowers. What impressed me about autoflowers was I could pop 5 different autoflower seeds and they would be really, really consistent. I would have some, you know, plants that would all look exactly the same, all smell this, you know, it was like dialed in. And I think there's something to that too, taking a strain out until, you know, it's what the breeder intended the customer to get, you know, like I spent time like finding and tracking down and fine tuning it to this point, and that's what I want you to get in your garden. So
Yeah, yeah. It makes sense. So then regarding the fine tuning, when you're putting two strains together, is it all about trying to reach an end goal of a certain terpene profile or structure, or is it more about just choosing the phenos that really perform and letting the genetics express themselves to their fullest?
yeah, a lot of it's luck. I'm gonna be honest. Like I think
Awesome.
I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna be locking in the, you know, I'm gonna be doing this, and then it like just turns out completely different. Or you know, sometimes you're not even trying for something and you hit gold. Like there's definitely moments like that. But for me, like for instance, I have the temptation that I'm in love with, and
Yep.
I'm taking clones that I'm growing out right now to be part of that S1 cross with a compound genetic strain called Joker's Candy. And that is, hold on, let me think. It's gummies times grape gasoline. And it was a collab they did with Canorado, who is also a really highly respected breeder. They put out gas. So I'm taking that, and the reason is I love the bag appeal, the bud structure of Temptation, all the colors it expresses, everything. But I want some gassy terps with it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the ones that I grew out were sweeter. I had one that was garlic, and then one that was kind of skunky. But the rest were like really, really sweet. And so I wanted to work some gas into that. So that's where this came in. Both gummies and grape gasoline that are in that Joker's Candy have jet fuel gelato in them and some other gassy strains in their lineage. So my goal is to try to just make a bunch of seeds with that, and then hunt them, like plant them out, hunt them, and then look for uh, that one that I want, which is the bag appeal, or as much of the Temptation bag appeal that I can retain with gassy, fuely terps.
Awesome. So for somebody like myself who's really interested in getting into breeding, and I touched on it a bit, I've got that freak show male that I want to do something with. What would be the best way to get into breeding? What advice would you give a first time breeder?
Buy a 10 pack. So first of all, we live in a time where you can pheno hunt the breeder, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and that's you're empowered to do that as a grower, which is awesome. We never had that many choices, but now there's so many choices. Like you have to beat them away with a stick. So that is awesome though, because for you, you have Instagram, you have Reddit, you have forums, you can look through seed banks. I mean, you have all these outlets to see who's putting the weed out there that is in line with you. Like, oh, that, and a lot of it goes based on, visual. Obviously, we don't, maybe strains that we're familiar with or have tried before, but a lot of it, 90% of it is based on looks. And that's why if you have a breeder that's active in Instagram or somewhere where they're posting their grows and giving you info, those are the people that I mess with and look at. But find out whose gear you want to run, buy a 10 pack, make sure it's in your budget, and then just pop them all. Just pop them all, put them in small containers, let them run. Um, Try to figure out how many plants you have space for, and then start, pulling them out, killing them. You got to be okay with killing plants. You can keep all the females and only pollinate certain ones, and still grow the other ones out for flower, but you got to kill all the males and just do it. Listen to what I just said earlier. It's literally that simple. Just collect the pollen and then paint it on and go for it. If
Yeah.
anything, you have seeds the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like
Well, worst
never
things
have to
could
pay for
happen.
seeds again. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So, real quick to touch on it, the collection of pollen. What's your process specifically? I've had a bunch of people ask me, and what do you do?
Yeah. So I just wait for them to dump. I had the males separated in a tent on their own, and by the time I'm ready to collect pollen, it's just one lone guy that's in there. I'll literally just take a paper plate, uh, bend one of the colas over, and then tap, and then fill the paper plate up. It fills up pretty quick, and then you'll want to take that and then put it over like a screen of some sort. If you like, a window screen mesh works perfectly. Um, some sort of a, just sift it because you want to get all the pods out.
Okay.
So you want to separate basically the pollen from the pods. You don't want any plant material in the end product. It's just bad for storage. And so once you like, yeah, sift it through a screen and you got all your pollen collected, like you can either just literally throw it in the tent if you wanted to, just turn your fan off and then like, make it rain. Yeah, just throw it in there. Or you could be a little more precise with it, like what I do, and I just take a paintbrush and literally just go over and try to hit all the little pistol tips with their own little, bit of pollen. And that does a great job for me. I'll have, all the way up and down, just covered in seeds. So
Yeah. It's a good way to go about it.
yeah, but any pollen that you don't use after that, you can seal in an airtight jar as long as, again, you want to dry it. Usually for like, I would say maybe a week or 2 weeks, you want it to be dry before and then you can freeze it.
Yeah.
Don't expect it to last a really, really long time, but you can keep it in the freezer for a while as long as there's no plant material and it was dry enough when you put it in there.
Yeah, and then after the defrost, you can use it once and no refreeze. That's it.
Yep. I wouldn't use it again. Nope. That's why, like, if you've got a bunch of it, you can put it in smaller little containers, like one use type vials, and then store it that way. That way, like, you don't have to have one huge container that you open up, and then lose all your pollen or try to reseal it or whatever.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, Rambo, how do we find you online? I mean, I know how to find you online and stuff. We follow each other on Instagram, but tell the people if they want to see some of your awesome grows.
Yeah, I'm really only on two social media platforms, Reddit and Instagram. Reddit, they're both the same. It's Rambo's underscore cousin. So RAMBOS underscore COUSIN. And I post pretty regularly. I post more on Instagram than I do on Reddit, but I post what I do, like that's what I would want to be given access to if I was looking into a breeder, was just like pics of their grow, like information on their strain, why they're growing a certain thing, or like what they're interested in. And I try to post all that stuff. So check me out.
Awesome. Yeah, and I totally encourage you guys to do it. Just straight up fire pictures. Last question, sir, and this one I'm going to throw at you from sort of left field because I didn't write this down. It occurred to me while we were talking, but the hype strains. Is a 10 pack of seeds really worth $3, $4, $5, $800, $1,000, or can you get just as good by, well, like you said, finding a good breeder who's willing to sell their product at a reasonable price?
That's a really good question. And it all depends. So one sec, let me hit this joint real quick.
Yeah, because I mean, there's like the peanut butter breath and the unicorn poof, stuff like that. Like Mr. Canucks's, recent videos made that the peanut butter cups, I think it was, or banana butter cups, wildly popular. And I mean, even myself, I find myself being drawn into the hype, going, I gotta grow this. Look at what he's done with
Right.
those.
Yeah. So the seed price has just continued to go up. There's definitely fire to be had for $50, $100, $200, $500 even. There's seed junkie stuff that's going for 550. And it all depends on what it is that you want, what you're looking for. For me, for breeding, like, I'm willing to pay a little bit of a higher price to work with some premium gear, as long as it is premium. Like, some of the stuff that the guy's either retired or it's old strains and they only sell on auction, and they do carry a really, really heavy price tag. I've dropped $500 on Seed Junkie, a pack of Jealousy, because I was interested in, because that's what Temptation, the ice cream cake times Jealousy, and I was interested in getting the original Jealousy, which you can't get anymore. So you can't get Seed Junkie seeds anymore anyways, unless if you're in California. So they get taxed up, but I don't suggest everyone do that. That's, but at the same time, I would tell people to invest in quality genetics, and sometimes you do have to pay a premium for that. I wouldn't pay for a normal grower. I would expect anywhere between the $100 to $200 range. You're going to find a lot of premium genetics in there. Can you find some for cheaper at $50? Definitely, 100%. What I did was, when I was looking into trying to get Jealousy, that's how I found Temptation. Was I was looking at who had Jealousy and had grown it out and was making seeds with it. And kind of through proxy, I was able to get my hands on the real Jealousy by like kind of looking on social media and seeing who was growing it, and then happened to find Lit Farms was making some crosses with it. And that's when I picked up the ice cream cake, and it was like half. It was like, so like Seed Junkies go for like 500, Canopyclip Farms was like 200, plus I got, some like a whole pack of freebies. So, at that price, like, if you find people that are working with those genetics that you want to get your hands on but are too expensive, you can definitely get them cheaper. And a lot of times worked. Whoever had their hands on it, if they're a good breeder, they improved it a little bit, or made a sick cross with it and
Yep.
are giving it out there for cheaper. So that
Absolutely.
would be my advice, is just keep your eyes on people who are working with the strains that you want, like some really expensive strains that aren't necessarily all hype, that are really good strains but just aren't accessible to you. There's lots of people on Instagram that can make that happen for you.
Yeah, and there's trading and stuff like that too. If you are that interested in getting a hold of one of those hype genetics, Rambo, awesome chat today, sir. Dude, I learned a lot from you. Great conversation. I mean, I definitely would love to keep going chatting more, but to that point, I think we'll have to have you back for another
Yeah, it's
episode.
been an hour already. Geez, I gotta
Yeah,
go
I
put
know.
my kid to bed, water my girls. I got lots of stuff to do.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
It was great talking to you too, man.
You too. All right. Well, I will let you get back at her. Guys, again, go check him out on Instagram. Find him on Reddit. Look at the fire that he's growing, the breeding stuff that he's doing. And, sir, thank you so much for stopping by the show. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
You too. Later,
All right.
guys.
We out.